TCU defense coordinator Joe Gillespie spoke to the media yesterday, and it feels like this defense can be really good, but it all hinges on that pass rush. We'll talk about it next on Lockdown Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's Locked On Horned Frogs. You can subscribe on YouTube. I'm Steven Simcox, your host. You can find me at SimcoxSteven on Twitter. You can also subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast in the audio form. So we're talking TCU defense today as the Frogs continue to roll through spring practice. Off day today. They'll be back at it tomorrow. Joe Gillespie spoke with the media after Monday's practice. It was nice to hear from him. I really feel like this defense, there's a ton of potential on the offense, and I think the offense is going to be really good. It might take some time with a lot of new faces, with some differences in the scheme, with Kendall Briles coming on board. But this defense with so many returners and another year under Coach Gillespie, I think that's the force that can really carry them, especially the first 5 or 6 weeks during the season. The question in my mind is where are they going to find a consistent pass rush? But touching on a few other things that he talked about, he mentioned that one thing that's been really helpful this spring is they're going up against, the TCU offense and team time and what's really called like good on good time. And so they're seeing a lot of tempo. They're seeing the ball snapped pretty quickly, getting up to the line, going in a hurry. That's what Kendall Briles wants to do on offense. And so that's only going to help them. I mean, you think about the Big 12, there's been somewhat of a shakeup. It's not as much running gun as it used to be. But you think about teams like Texas Tech, which are still moving at a really fast pace. Texas likes to use tempo at times. They're kind of more like TCU was last year, where it's situational, but they like to get up into the line and get plays going. And so for the defense, if your offense is doing that, that's challenging because, they can score quickly. Or if you go 3 and out, you're probably going 3 and out in a hurry. And then your defense is back on the field, which means you have to lean on some quality depth. But the flip side of that is hopefully it's something that helps condition them really well and gets them ready for what they're going to see during the bulk of the season. And getting those reps is only going to be helpful for this TCU football team. I think the corners and the safeties and the linebackers on this team are in really good shape. Now, I've talked about Avery Helm a lot over the past few months, the transfer from Florida. He seems to be impressing in spring camp. Really physical corner, is not afraid to play, tight press man coverage. He's going to step in and be a big-time contributor. I feel like he's going to be really good from the opening snap against Colorado. On the other side, Josh Newton obviously got a ton of experience last year. And then you got some guys that you can move in and out, like Channing Canada, Mason White, Ronald Lewis, the signee from a few years back, Kyron Chambers potentially. There's options there in that secondary, and losing a Thorpe Award winner is a huge deal. But it seems like they have the guys in place to step up and fill the shoes that Travius Hodges-Tomlinson left and do it in a really, respectable way. The safeties, you're pretty much bringing everybody back. And so guys like Mark Perry and Bud Clark, Millard Bradford, who have seen so many, snaps at this point and have played a lot of football. Hopefully their communication's better. Safeties are asked to do a lot in this defense. But, in year 2, they should be reacting faster, hopefully not thinking as much and getting to the football in a hurry. And so I like where they are in that spot. I also like where they are with linebackers, with Terrence Cooks coming back from his injury. Johnny Hodges will be there, Shad Banks, Jamoy Hodge. You got guys like hopefully Marcel Brooks who will be fully healthy. Jonathan Bax is one of the players that Coach Gillespie mentioned yesterday as somebody who, even as a true freshman, he thinks is going to be a big-time contributor for them. but that might take some time. But maybe he's somebody. He played like at the edge position in college. Now he's gonna be an outside linebacker. Maybe he's someone who could help with that pass rush question that we have. But the D line, in my mind, is where this all hinges, because if you can't, they did a decent job of covering up some of their deficiencies in the pass rush last year. But if you can't consistently get to the quarterback, it's just tough to have an elite defense. Like, it's almost impossible because there's so many problems that creates. Now, Dominic Williams is back. Caleb Fox, Timon Mitchell are guys that got, big time snaps. So I think as your starters go, you'll be fine. But D-line is the position that you're probably rotating players in and out more than anyone else. And so, a couple players that he mentioned that he hopes can step up. Paul Olawale has gotten a lot of reps here in spring camp. Connor Lindgren's another player who's going to be a redshirt freshman this season, and maybe he can give them some snaps. I mentioned Jonathan Bax at that outside linebacker position, if he could provide some pass rush. But you're losing your best pass rusher in Dylan Horton. I mean, he really became the go-to guy as far as getting to the QB and making tackles behind the line of scrimmage. So that's a huge hole to fill. Michael Ibunkon Okode is another, second-year player who they are expecting big things from. And so you want those young guys to step up and show out in a big way. There's a couple true freshmen like Marcus Deal and Avion Carter. Even though Dominic Williams was such a force last year, it's just so rare for a freshman in the trenches to be dudes like that. I mean, I would love if that's the case. I just have reservations, especially since those guys are not enrolled early and going through spring camp. But I think they're going to be big-time contributors, in the next few years. It's just not going to be this season. And I think they'll hit the portal hard for some depth there. It's just hard to expect somebody to be, a huge day one starter if they're transferring in the spring or summer, because that most likely means that there wasn't a spot for them in the rotation at their current position or at their current school where they were at. So a lot of questions to be answered in that regard. Garrett Hayes also made that move over to D-line. He does have, a good frame, a big body. So maybe he's someone that as the year goes on can settle into that role. But to me, that's the key. If this team can get a consistent pass rush and can rush the passer well, I feel like this defense is going to be a huge force for TCU in 2023. When we come back, I'll answer a few of your questions or respond to some of your comments on the YouTube channel that you put down yesterday. We'll do that in a moment. Before we do that, though, I do want to talk about FanDuel. FanDuel, best betting app, best wagering source in the U.S., right? They're the official betting partner of the NBA. It's where you need to go. It's your one-stop shop. They have a safe, secure, and easy-to-use app. So that's simple. Just download that. You can get going. Or you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and take advantage of that no-sweat first bet deal they have going on, where if you put as little as $5 down, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus bets. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. NBA, MLB picking up on Thursday, opening day, spring training coming to an end. So that's exciting. A lot more opportunities to start wagering. Final Four coming up this weekend, both the men's and women's. Do those money line bets, make those parlay bets, bet on some props, whatever it is that you're interested in. FanDuel, to make it easy, that's safe and secure. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. So a few of you chimed in on the conversation on yesterday's show. I talked some about the slot wide receivers, right? Like JoJo Earl, players like that who I expect to make an impact in 2023 for the TCU offense, and, what that could mean for the TCU football program this year. I also, threw this question out there. Like I was kind of joking around that Texas played in the Elite Eight on Sunday against Miami. And even though I probably should have been rooting for Texas because of that Big 12 connection, I found myself rooting for Miami just because I can never bring myself to root for the Horns. And I'm sorry to Jonathan Davis, host of Locked On Horns. He does a really great job. And that's actually a really good podcast if you want to know more about the 40 acres and Texas football and basketball and all that. But I, as someone who grew up in the state of Texas, that's not a Texas fan. It's just really hard for me to ever root for Texas. And Zoom Play chimed in and said he was rooting for the Canes all the way. And then on the football front, he said he thought that Frogs have some of the best slot receivers in the country. Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely have the potential to. JoJo Earl, the production was not there at Alabama aside from what he did on special teams, but didn't get a ton of opportunities. I think he's primed to have a big year. And then John Paul Richardson, I mean, he was a pro's pro last year. Just made a lot of plays at Oklahoma State, was tough to cover, always found himself open, made some big catches in that game in Fort Worth when the Pokes took on TCU in that crazy triple overtime thriller. So excited to have him on board and think he'll be great for TCU this year. I think both those players are going to make some big-time waves for TCU football and be special in the year 2023. So, the slot position, the tight end position, I feel like the Frogs can have a lot of success making things happen over the middle of the field, which is really not what they were able to do well towards the end of last year. Teams really seem to squeeze that and force them to throw the ball outside. Brian Capers said we had trouble with the Bulldogs, period. Georgia and Gonzaga. Yeah, that's kind of a funny match. That Gonzaga game was a lot closer, but both teams with the mascot of the Bulldogs. And, I don't want to see – well, I guess it's a kind of a catch-22 thing because if you see Kirby Smart again, most likely you're in the national title game again or the college football playoff again, which would be awesome. And I'm not going to refuse that at all because that, even though that's a tremendous challenge, that would be an amazing thing for TCU's program and for its stability moving forward. But at the same time, we all know what the national championship game was. It wasn't a good time. Nobody had fun. And so, don't want to experience that again. I think if TCU got back, though, they'd be much better prepared and would have a much better idea what they need to do to at least keep that game more competitive, which wouldn't be harder to keep that game more competitive than they did because they got destroyed. Tanner McKinney said at running back, he thinks they will do well. He thinks Trey will be the starter and Cam Cook will be the second running back and will give Sanders a run. That's an interesting take. I really think Amani Bailey will be higher on the depth chart than you have him right now, Tanner. And Cam Cook, he had a really special senior year. I think he's a really good football player. Again, I feel like it's just going to be hard for him to, jump up the depth chart that far as a true freshman. Trey Sanders was a huge wild card, super talented, former 5-star recruit, and was like somebody that Alabama wanted on the field. Just after that car accident, it was really hard for him to stay healthy. But you see him, and he definitely passes the eyeball test. I mean, he looks really good. He looks like he's just so tough to bring down. He's got great size and great ability in the open field. So if Trey Sanders is your starter, I think that's really encouraging because that means he jumped a few guys on the depth chart. And Trent Battle is also a player. I like Trent a lot. He was certainly a factor in the offense last year. It's just a question of, is he the type of guy that can give you like 15 to 20 carries in a game? I'm still not sure that he's bulked up enough to do that, but maybe that's changed in the off season. And that'll be one of the things during the spring and during the fall that I would love to hear more about and get more insight about because, man, he can make people miss and catch the ball in the backfield. He can do some special things. Brian Capers again said, no, I never root for the Shorthorns. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I just can't bring myself to root for Texas. Sorry if that makes me a bad Big 12 fan, even though since they're leaving, I really don't feel any sort of way about it because they're going to the SEC next year anyway. And then one username that I can't really pronounce and I'm kind of afraid to read. So I'll just say Channel 8080 says the biggest advantage will be not playing Georgia this season. Yeah, that was a really tough game, the national title game. I will say, though, if you're playing Georgia again, that means that you're in the college football playoff again. And that would be great for TCU long term. So I'll take that challenge, even though it was, such a tough situation last season. I would, I'd take on that challenge again. I think TCU would be better prepared and would be more ready for that moment if it came up again, even though they'll have to take – one thing I've thought about is if they're in the playoff race again, there will be people that say, no, don't put TCU in because we saw what they did last year, which is stupid because they beat Michigan. They won the first game. Yeah, they got obliterated by Georgia, but blame Michigan for losing that game. Don't call TCU a fraud. TCU won that game. They led wire to wire. They got it done, but, I digress. Anyway, if they play Georgia again, then it means TCU had an outstanding season, and you really can't complain about those kind of results. But, yes, certainly as many of you do, I have some horrible memories from that night that I thought was going to be at least, competitive and so good for the brand and so good for the team. But it is what it is. If you want to chime in on YouTube, please do that in the comments, and I'll try to respond either on the video or, in the episode the next day. I need to do a better job of that. Haven't done as good of that as well with that lately, but I'll try to get better at it. When we come back, we'll close things up. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. TCU baseball tonight, they get UTA in a midweek matchup, and then going on the road to Lubbock. Texas Tech got swept by Texas last weekend. So I would expect a team that's hungry to try to bounce back, especially on Friday night. Will be a tough task for TCU, but we'll have some coverage of that after the game, and then, we'll keep covering TCU baseball all season long. We'll also have more spring practice notes on Wednesday's show. This is Locked On Horned Frogs.